Okay, so we are recording. It is May 25th, 2013, and what we're going to do is start off with just some general questions about yourself.
Sure.
And if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself, your name, age, where you were born, some general biographical information.
Okay. My name is Alan Winnick. I'll be 90 years old on June 5th. Today is May 25th. So it's only another 10 or 12 days. I was born in Brooklyn and lived there till I was 12 or 13. And then I went away to boarding school because my folks got divorced. And I was at boarding school until I was almost 16, at which time I went away to college in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Let's see. I was at Harvard for 3.5 years, having gone to summer school in 1942 because I wanted to get out before I had to go into the Army. Went into the Army in February 1943, and I was first in the Army Air Forces, the Army Air Corps. There was no separate Air Force then. And I was in the cadet program, but I was washed out because in 1941, August, I was flying in a private Taylor-craft airplane, which crashed into the ground. And I broke 37 bones, including my frontal sinus plate, which is here. And when I was in the cadet program, one of the things they did was to test us for high altitude flying, where there's a differential between the inside of your, I don't know what you'd call it, but whatever it is, I had severe headache. And they checked and they found out that I had this thing. I hadn't told them that when I went into the Army, because unlike now, at that time, everybody that I knew wanted to get into the Army. And we did. Anyway, I was washed out of the cadet program. And let me see, where did I go from there? Oh, I went to a radio gunnery school. I couldn't understand why I couldn't be a pilot or navigator, but I could be a gunner because it was still in the air, but that's the Army. Anyway, from there, I was there a little while, and they put me in, transferred me to the Officer Candidate School for Combat Engineering at Fort Belvoir. Is that right? Oh no, first, before that, I went to San Antonio as an air cadet, and then was washed out for the pressure chamber, which I failed with my head. And from there, I went to Radio Gunnery School and then to OCS at Fort Belvoir in the Combat Engineers. I was there a little bit. We were building what was called a Bailey Bridge to ford streams. You do it with a tree that you cut down. It becomes like a telephone pole. You stick that into a hole in the ground with pulleys and ropes, and it can be used as a crane to put logs across the stream so that the men could cross. While we were doing that, 3 guys were holding the ropes so that the crane would work. And one guy slipped in the mud and the thing fell down, the whole damn tree, and I flew into the water. And it wasn't much water, but it was very bad for my back. And the result of that was I was laid up a while. when I got out of that, I was at Fort Belvoir, and one day, the CO of the OCS called me in and said, listen, you're going to Washington today, to the Pentagon. Somebody wants to interview you. So, olive green, olive drab Chevrolet, it was always Chevrolets, picked me up and took me to the Pentagon, and I met a couple of, not senior officers, but lieutenant colonels, who asked me a lot of questions about college and things like that, and athletics, which I had done at college. And the next thing I knew, when I got back to OCS, the guy that ran it, the CO, said, you're leaving here in 3 days, and we'll give you orders. So they gave me orders, sealed orders, which had a wax imprint on them, and took me to the railroad station in Washington.
Now, I'll just interrupt at that point. Before you were given the orders, you got hurt. Were you in the hospital?
No,
You weren't.
I just sprained my back.
Just sprained your back, so it wasn't a major thing.
Oh, no.
No, but when you were in the airplane crash,
Oh,
you were.
I had 37 broken bones.
Yeah. Just if you can just talk to the camera.
Oh,
You had 37 broken bones.
37 broken bones.
And did they put you in the hospital? Obviously. How
Oh,
long were you in the hospital?
Well, the accident was on the 18th of August, 1941, which I remember. And I went to a hospital in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, called the House of Mercy. Today it's called Pittsfield General. And I was there until, I think, early September, about two weeks or 3 weeks. And I had a body cast on, a cast on the right leg, a cast on the right arm, and a big bandage around the head. Then in early September, I went back to New York. My folks lived in Manhattan on Riverside Drive, and I was there, but I wanted to go back to college because I was entering my junior year. And my mother said, no, you can't go. My father said, absolutely, you should go. And I went with the body cast and everything. My roommate had to be a little bit of a nursemaid, but it all worked out just fine.
But in terms of being in the hospital, you were just treated for your broken bones, nothing else.
Well, there was nothing else.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, the body cast, it was annoying to be there.
Okay, and this was a civilian hospital, not a.
Oh, I wasn't in the service. This was
before you were in service.
Right.
Okay, so let's pick up at the time when you received these orders with the waxed seal on the envelope. Did you have any sense of
I had no idea where I was going.
What these were about?
No, nor did I know what they were quizzing me on when I was at the Pentagon.
Okay.
And for that interview.
And why do you think they chose you at that point to do this?
I have no idea, really. I was a good student. I graduated magna cum laude, and I was a fairly decent athlete. And I ran my house. Harvard has undergraduate houses, not for freshmen, but sophomores, juniors, and seniors. And at that time, there were 7 houses. Each one probably had 200 men, maybe more. And I ran the athletic program there, and I wrestled for them.
So they saw you as athletic, smart leader type.
Yeah, I don't know what they saw me, whatever it was. They sent me there. I had college physics, I had biology, I had organic chemistry, even though my major was in economics. So they sent me, they gave me special orders, sealed, and took me to Washington with the tickets. You didn't pay for tickets in those days if you were a GI. to go to Knoxville, Tennessee. And that's where I went. I don't know when this was. It had to be in the summer or in the early fall, maybe September.
And how did you get to Knoxville? What kind of transportation was it?
Railroad. Took the train, a regular civilian train. Of course, a lot of GIs were traveling then too. And I know the train stopped in Bristol, Tennessee. I'd never heard of Bristol. And there, I think I changed trains. I don't know why, unless I just stopped in Bristol. As I told you, that was the first time I'd ever seen a men's room for colored and a men's room for whites. I'd been in the South before, but not really, only to Florida. And that doesn't count because they were all refugees from the North. Anyway, when I got to Knoxville, it was late in the afternoon. And I didn't know what I was supposed to do there. I was in the railroad station. So I figured, a little slow in thinking, that maybe I should open these orders, even though they were sealed with wax and a stamp on them, on the wax. So I did open the orders, and it's told me to go.
By the way, just
Yeah.
to interject, the wax seal with the stamp, do you have any recollection of the stamp?
No, it was a round thing, and
Like an official seal?
it was an official seal.
But it was, what did it say? Did it have any,
It had something on it.
yeah.
I have no idea what it said. I remember it was stamped. The stamp being not a paper stamp, a stamp on the wax. And the wax was around the
Flap of the envelope?
where the envelope changes direction.
Okay.
So
So we'll start then again with you opening the seal.
I opened the seal, and it said to go to the Hotel Admiral Farragut, I think that was the name of it, and take a room and wait. So I took a taxi to the Admiral Farragut. I had never been in Knoxville before. And I checked in. I think the room was $3. And this was a very good hotel. But this was 1940, I guess 44. No.
44.
Yeah, 44.
Shouldn't it be 45? The year of the...
No, it was, oh, wait a minute, maybe. It was, I think it was, no, it had to be 44. Let's see, the invasion was in June 44, the European invasion. At that time, I was at Sioux Falls in the radio gunnery thing. Then I went to the OCS, and then I was in radio gunnery, then I went to Combat Engineers OCS, and from there, very quickly, I went to the Manhattan Project, which I didn't know what it was.
But that occurs in July of 45.
July of 45 was the end. That was when we had the test.
Yes.
That's right. So before that, I was in Decatur, Illinois, with the Houday Hershey Project.
I see. So you were there for quite a while.
Oh yeah, I was there a year.
So it was probably late 44 then.
It was fall of 44, early fall probably, where I was. I went to Knoxville. I was at the Admiral Farragut Hotel. Nothing happened. I went out downstairs for dinner, and then I went over to the USO, which was a few blocks away. Shall I go on?
Yeah, I just wanted to turn this thing off. So you,
And I spent a little time at the USO,
Okay.
went back to the hotel, no message, nothing, went to sleep. And early in the morning, not early, about 7 o'clock, which for me was late because we were in the Army, I got a call asking my name and my Army serial number. And they said to wait, get dressed and wait in the room. And somebody come and fetch me. And that's what I did.
you were in civilian clothes at that point.
No, I was in Army clothes.
Oh, the guys that came to fetch you were in civilian.
They were in civilian clothes. Anyway, two guys came up. They were both in, as I recall, in dark suits, which is kind of silly. It was warm in Knoxville because it was September. But that's the way they were. They were very courteous, but they asked me to show them all the contents of my luggage, which was barracks bag, and took me downstairs, and I paid the bill for the hotel.
Let me interrupt you, where did this money come from?
I had money.
Was it your personal money?
Yeah, they didn't give me any money for it. I don't think. I didn't need any money except for eating and the hotel bill. The hotel bill was $3. The eating was maybe a couple of dollars.
Right.
All the money, I think it was my money. I didn't have an allowance for the trip that I remember anyway. Maybe they paid it back to me if I had receipts. That was incidental. I don't remember that at all. Anyway, I got in the car with these two guys. They sat in the front, and I sat in the rear. It was a black Chevrolet, maybe a 1939 or 40 or 41. We drove in Knoxville for a little while. It isn't a huge town, but it's big. And we stopped on a street in the industrial section of Knoxville, where there were factories and things like that. We stopped at a place which was a garage inside. We didn't go inside, we were on the street. But the doors raised. They were raised, and it was you could see inside. There were a couple of fuel pumps, you know, which you use to fill up your tanks with gas. And they didn't get out of the car, and we didn't move in, but they honked the horn, and they got a honk back. And then we went away. We left, and left Knoxville. And we drove, and eventually it wasn't far. It was a beautiful morning. We drove on, and I kept asking them, where are we going? And they kept giving me no answer. They said, you'll find out, you know. We were stopped by a guardhouse with a couple of soldiers, armed. And I had to get out of the car, and they looked at my baggage again. And then we got back in the car and drove. And then we were again stopped. But this time there was barbed wire on both sides of as far as I could see. And again, they asked, and they had pictures of me at the other guard place and at this one. From there, when we cleared that thing, we went into some more vegetation and so on. And all of a sudden, I saw a big, huge building, no windows. It had to be as large as a football field. And then another building after that, and so I didn't know what it was all about. But there were a number of people walking around. And they took me to a little place, an area where there were 2 Army barracks and a small office building. And the 2 guys that were in the car said, "This is where you're going, and you go into that office." So I did, and it was a military office. There were a couple of officers there, and I had to report and tell them who I was, which they knew. And they told me to go into one of these barracks, A or B, I forget, and get a cot and a footlight, a place to store my stuff. And I went in. It was now maybe 10 in the morning, beautiful day. I go into the Army barracks, and it was an Army barracks. And there are a lot of cots, including a number of them which guys were sleeping in at 10 in the morning. I knew it was Army, but I couldn't understand that. And I found out subsequently that all these guys worked in the Manhattan Project in some of these buildings that I saw. And the work was 24 hours a day, so guys were on shifts. And the guys who were on the night shift were in bed sleeping during the day. Anyway, I was in Oak Ridge for at most 4 days, 5 days. I don't remember. I remember I had nothing to do all day. I don't know why I was there. I did find out that the first building I saw was called K25. I found out considerably later that it was full of centrifuges. What they were doing, I had no idea. I ran into a guy from Harvard whom I knew slightly. He had been in my house, Dunster House. I didn't know him well because he was very technical, what we would call today a nerd, very smart. And he had majored in physics. And I asked him what the hell was going on there, and he said, well, he really didn't know, but he knew it was very complicated and very important, and that he worked in a place where they had a lab and some centrifuges. This, I don't know what it was. I never did find out any more about that because I left soon. I after about 4 or 5 days, I was called into the little office. I had nothing to do during those 4 or 5 days. And they gave me orders to go to Decatur, Illinois, via Chicago. I went from Knoxville to Chicago, transferred, and went down to Decatur, Illinois. I don't remember the name of the railroad I was on going from Knoxville to Chicago. I do remember that the Illinois Central was the thing I went from Chicago to Decatur. In Decatur, I didn't know what I was supposed to do, but a guy met me at the train, an Army guy. Name was Dave Evans, I think. He was a master sergeant. And he said, well, we've got a place for you to live, and I'll let you settle in, and tomorrow somebody will take you or lead you to where you're going to work, except that you won't know how to do it, so you'll be guided there the first day. So they took me to a house on 1143 West Forest Avenue. Now that is 70 some odd years ago, I think. Well, anyway, it was 1944, and that's a lot of years. But I remember it was 1143 West Forest, Decatur, Illinois, where a man, an older man, had this house, he and his wife, And they had 3 rooms that they were renting out. And one was for me. There were 2 other rooms, and there were 2 guys in them, both civilians. Very nice guys. One was a metallurgist, and the other guy was, I don't know what, another kind of a physicist of some sort. One was named Fisher, and I can't remember. Oh, and the other one was Carter, I believe. I remember one was Fisher for sure. You know, some of this is hazy. The next day, a guy came in, a civilian, and drove me to the plant. There was a big plant there, Indicator, called the Hudai Hershey Corporation. It was a plant of the Hudai Hershey Corporation. The Hudai Hershey Corporation was a Detroit, Michigan outfit. They did a lot of chrome plating and things like that for the Ford Motor Company. That was their major customer. They were a pretty big outfit, apparently, and they were a subcontractor for the Manhattan Project. I knew it was the Manhattan Project already. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew that was what it was, because I found that out at Oak Ridge. They called it that. Let me think now. Yeah, I went there, and they told me that I was going to be in the quality control department, which was run at that time by a Yale guy named Jack Hogerton. Very nice guy, also a civilian.
What's his last name again?
Hogerton. I don't know, Hogarton or something like that. Good sense of humor, very bright. And they had this department, quality control. It controlled the quality of all the different departments of the Hudai Hershey plant. This plant received nickel from Inco, from International Nickel Company, and used it with aluminum, I think, as I recall, to make tubes that were blasted with hydrogen to make little holes, and that was called separation barrier. We were making separation barrier. I had no idea what separation barrier was, and I didn't know what it was used for. The reason I say it now is because it's general knowledge. At this time, wasn't then. After I was there a couple of months, Hogerton was pulled away to go somewhere else. He may have even been inducted. And the guy that ran that plant was a man named Walter Pinner. He was a Hudai Hershey guy from Michigan, and he was responsible for this plant.
What was his last name?
Pinner, P-I-N-E-R, I think. Not Piner, but Pinner. His secretary was an elderly lady, marvelous lady named Marjorie Thrift. I had never heard of the last name Thrift. But she was very, very nice. And he was nice. The plant was run by Walter Pinner and a fellow named Frank Fisher. Anyway, when Hogerton left, Pinner said to me, "You've been in this job now for 2-3 months, and we want you to run the quality control." Now that was fairly high security, because this plant made, as I said, separation barrier. And to make it, they started with raw materials, and it went through 9 different processes. and all metallurgical, really. And nobody from one section was allowed to go into another section unless he had a badge, which had, all the badges had colors, blue, red, green, and sometimes blue and red. And based on those little plastic things with your picture and the thing, that based on that you could go to certain areas. Well, I had, of course, knowledge of all 9 areas because we got reports daily from them as to what was going on in their department and what the tests showed, because they had to test the product all the way through. Anyway, I did that. Then I was interviewed one day by a guy, I don't remember his name. I did not like him. He was, I don't know, I didn't care for him at all. But he said that from here on in, any correspondence I would have with him would be with the name Roy Anthony. That would be my name. And my job there was to see what, this is a tough thing, but this was then. They wanted to make sure that there was no unionization of that plant, because they feared that if it was unionized, job descriptions would pour into the union from all of the 9 different stages of production. And they didn't want that to happen. And it happens that, I think it was the United Electrical Workers in Chicago was angling to unionize the plant. There were a huge number of people working there in the 3 shifts. And they didn't want that to happen, and one of my duties was to make sure that there were no agitators. And if they were, under the name of Roy Anthony, I should write up a report, and they get rid of the guy, or woman, whichever it was.
How often did that happen?
When I was there, twice. I think twice.
And the agitators were people who...
they were working in the plant.
Wanted to form unions, basically.
They were working for the union.
Okay.
I can't remember, I think the guy, the head of the union in Chicago, I think it was a name like Scalise, but it wasn't that. Anyway.
But this was a time when they were working under national security.
Oh, yeah.
So wouldn't that have superseded other things?
I know.
Because they were trying to keep these 9 units separate?
Rephrase that question.
Wouldn't the government have been able to supersede any union activity because of national security?
I don't know. I would think so, but they maybe this is the way the government did it. They sorted out. I mean, there were rules. They were not supposed to unionize, but these guys were doing that or trying. Anyway, it was a minor thing. Now, a couple of times, as the year went on, later in the year, in July, in the beginning of July, or yeah, sort of the beginning, I was sent down to Albuquerque with a number of reports that they didn't want to mail and had to be sent and given to the office there.
Let's talk about how you got to Albuquerque and how you were told to go there.
Well, the guy, my boss in the Army Evans, called me in and said, "Listen, I want you to, you're going on a trip to New Mexico. You'll be there just a couple of days. There's some things that have to go down there, and they're absolutely top secret. And we do not want them to go by mail or any Army courier. We want them to go with people we know that we're sure of. And so would you take 3 days, 4 days, and go?" And I went down on the, I went to, from Decatur to St. Louis on the train, regular train, on the Illinois Central. And then I went, I think, on the Katy, but I'm not sure. Katy line, I don't remember. I went on the train to Albuquerque.
Not a C-47 plane?
No, that was, I went on that later.
Okay.
In fact, I came back on the C-47 plane. But that was a day, 2 days after the explosion, or 1 day. Anyway, I went down there and delivered the stuff in an office, and they gave me a place to sleep in a not in a tent, in a little barracks. There were a lot of people. And then I was asked to stay on a couple days, which I did, and one of those days was the test. But that wasn't there.
No, you went to Albuquerque. From Albuquerque, you had to then.
Oh, I forgot.
Yeah, you had to be picked up.
I went to Los Alamos.
Yeah, and how did you get to Los Alamos?
In a car. I think it was a Jeep or something.
Okay.
It was a small car, and it was just the driver and me. I think, yeah, as I recall. So I went to Albuquerque, and then I had to go to Trinity.
Well, let's just talk about Los Alamos for a minute.
Yeah.
So you were picked up in a Jeep in Albuquerque, and you drove up to Los Alamos into the mountains.
Yeah.
It must have been extremely scenic and beautiful.
Beautiful. It was in the nice, well, summer weather.
Right. So describe Los Alamos.
Well, I can't really. It was fenced. There was a gate we went through to get in there. I can't remember the name of the gate. Samson Gates, some kind of gate.
Well, you're thinking Stallion Gate.
Yeah.
But that's Trinity.
Oh, you're right. It's, I'm getting mixed up.
That's okay.
That's where that's how I got.
Let's go back to Los Alamos. So you went up to Los Alamos. Was there a gate? Was there a fence?
There was. Yes, there was. You had to go through an armed guard to get in. And in there were buildings, all low slung. You know, one floor buildings is all I remember.
Okay.
And a lot of them, and a lot of people scurrying around. Civilian people, army people. I never did know anything about the whole damn thing.
You were in a cabin or a cottage or something like that.
A cabin it was.
Yeah. Describe the time you actually saw Oppenheimer.
I saw him just one day in a mess hall. And I didn't know who it was, but some guy that I did know pointed him out to me.
Was he dressed in a suit and tie like he usually was? Or?
I don't know. I looked at his face. It was a hatchet face, sort of. Thin.
Very long, thin.
Yeah, thin face. And he was at a table with 3 or 4 other guys, one of whom was a famous physicist.
Edward Teller?
Szilard.
Oh, Szilard.
Yeah. Not Teller. Anyway, this place was crawling with people like that. And the soldiers that were there were all, a lot of them were from Caltech, MIT, you know, places like that. A lot of very bright guys who said very little. It really was, the security was great. Anyway.
But you were also asked to provide security, weren't you?
Well, I was asked to be one of many people that would be not at Trinity, but around it, you know.
You mean only, but not in Los Alamos?
No.
We're still in Los Alamos.
At Los Alamos,
Yeah.
I was asked to go. I was told to go the next, after I delivered the papers and spent a day or so there, doing very little, because I wasn't part of the thing.
Well, this is interesting, because they had you going north to Los Alamos, but then they wanted you to go to Trinity, which is south of Albuquerque. So they first had you go to north, and then you just spent...
I had to deliver the stuff there.
Oh, you had to deliver what stuff?
Some papers.
It was just papers.
Yeah.
So you had to be...
I didn't know what was in them.
You had to deliver papers to Los Alamos.
Yeah.
You spent a couple of nights there? Or...
2 nights, I think.
And then you were given new orders.
Yeah, I was told to go, and I went in actually it was not an army bus, it was an army truck with canvas over it, and there were other people with me.
And you could describe that as quite a trip.
It was a long trip, it was bumpy.
Yeah.
But it was fun though, because there were maybe 8 or 10 people in there. All, I think, doing exactly, you know, trying to secure the outskirts.
The perimeter?
Yeah, the perimeter.
All right, so it was a long, bumpy trip. You finally got to Los Alamos, not Los Alamos, sorry,
Trinity.
Alvarado.
Yeah.
And you got to something called the Stallion Gate. The Stallion Gate plays an important role in the film I'm making.
Oh, really? Why?
Because it's the entry point to one of the most significant places during World War II. And also, and one of the things I haven't been able to determine, which you were going to tell me now, hopefully, is what it looked like. I know what it looks like today. I've gone through it a few times.
I don't know.
Was it a big electrified fence? Was it a wooden fence? Stallion Gate was a gate to a farm, not a farm, a ranch, originally.
I think, as I recall, it was a wooden gate at the time.
Gate.
Is that what you found out too?
I've heard that.
Yeah.
But I haven't heard of a lot of detail. I haven't seen it.
I haven't got any detail on it.
It was a wooden gate, so did it look to you like a secured area or just a gate?
It was a gate. There were soldiers.
There were soldiers manning the gate, but it was wooden.
As I recall, it was wooden.
Was it the kind of gate you might see at the road to a ranch type gate? Was it more significant than that?
I'll tell you, I've never been to a ranch type gate.
Okay.
So I don't know.
All right, so you got to the gate, and what happened?
Well, we went through the gate after a cursory
Did
examination.
they have pictures of you there too?
No, they didn't.
Okay.
They had pictures of me leaving Knoxville
Yeah.
and going to Oak Ridge.
All right.
And anyway, I was there, and the next day they...
Well, let's talk about you getting there. You said there was you possibly saw about 100 people.
I don't know how many. There were a lot of people.
And where did you stay?
I stayed in a temporary thing. It wasn't a tent.
Like a Quonset hut or something?
Yeah, sort of like that.
Trailer kind of thing? Something, yeah. Okay.
I remember getting there, the cot was fine.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was a quick thing. I was there. They did issue us what is now we'd call Polaroid glasses. You know, at that time I didn't know. They were smoky glasses, which we were told to wear the next day, the next evening.
Next morning?
Well, no. Yeah, in the evening they wanted us to put it on.
Oh, they did? Okay.
And just to try, you put them on. You could see fine out of them. And I didn't know why they wanted us to do that, except by that time, people were saying that there was going to be a big test. And they had built a big Eiffel Tower kind of thing, which I found out later was where the bomb was attached. I know the next day, after the bomb went off, they sent a number of people, not us, I guess technicians, to test about all the instruments that they had there for the temperature, for the blast effect, all of that. Only nothing was left.
Okay, so that morning,
After the explosion?
before the explosion.
Oh, early in the morning.
Yeah, tell me a little bit. You got up, and where did they take you, and what did you do before the explosion?
Nothing. They told me to. They distributed a number of guys.
Actually, you know what? Let's just take a break.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're just going to start again, and we were at the point where you had spent the night at the Trinity site in Alamos. And the question now is, did somebody come and wake you up and give you orders at that point prior to the test that morning?
I know we were up early, like 3 o'clock in the morning. I don't know how I got up. Maybe somebody came in and yelled at us.
Okay. And what were your orders at that point? What did you do?
I was just told to go to a certain place and lie down on the grass, or I don't know if there was any grass, on the ground, facing outward, away. Well, they told us where to face. Put the glasses on, the ones that they had given us, and look and see if anybody was coming around or walking around. Nobody was supposed to be there.
So you had two. There was two purposes. One was security, to secure the perimeter, and the other one was to actually view the test.
We were not to view the test.
You weren't.
We were facing away from it.
But what happened, if you can?
Well, what happened was, the first thing, it was a huge noise. I'm sorry, the first thing was a huge light, a lot of light. Very soon, the sky lit up. And then came noise, and then after that came warmth. In that order, I think. And then I turned around and looked. And this damn thing was going up in the air. It was way up in the air already. And I knew it was a bomb, or I didn't know it was a bomb. I knew it was an explosion. And I knew it was nuclear energy because by then guys had talked about it a little in the project. And it was very exciting. And as a matter of fact, I don't know if I did tell you this. I then went back to Decatur, and I went on a leave. Oh, I know. My grandmother was dying, and she was in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, at the House of Mercy Hospital, where I had my airplane thing. And I got permission to go to Pittsfield from Decatur. This was in maybe July 20th. I don't remember when she died, but I went up and she died, and there was going to be a funeral. And when I went up, that's right, it was late July. I went up and I had to go to New York to get to Pittsfield, because Pittsfield, you went on the railroad, the New York Central, from Grand Central Station up to Pittsfield, Massachusetts. And when I got to New York, and I flew there from Chicago. I know from Chanute Field. I think I don't even, I know I flew on a C-47. You could fly on those for free if you were a soldier and you had a reason to do it. I flew to New York. I got there about 5 in the afternoon. There was no train to Pittsfield till the next morning. So I went. I didn't know what to do. I had the keys to my folks' apartment. I went there. I figured I'd sleep there, but in the meantime, I was hungry. So I called a very good friend of mine, Abba Bear, who was then in the South Pacific. He was in the Air Force. But his mother lived on West End Avenue and 84th Street, I think. And we were living on, I was in my folks' apartment on Riverside Drive in 72nd. So I called to see how Mrs. Bear was. And she told me that her 2 daughters, sisters of Abby Bear, were there with her. One of the daughters was married to a guy who was in Europe still, even though the war was over there. The other guy was a doctor. His name was Kavar. And he was on his way to Japan, not to Japan, to the Pacific for the invasion. And she said, what was I doing in town? I said, my grandmother was ill, was dying or died, and I had to go see her, go up to Pittsfield. I think she was dying. And she said, why don't you come over? So I did. I went over and I had supper there. And the 2 girls were there, and they wanted to know what I was doing. And I said I was mixed up in some technical stuff. And they were extremely worried about their 2 husbands, because Sandy, one of the boys in Europe, was being deployed to Asia, and the other guy was on his way there then. And Abba was on Ieshima, not Iwo Jima, but Ieshima, another island. And so I remember this day, and they remember. I told them not to worry, that the war would be over before Labor Day. This was a month before. How do you know? I said, I know. I promise you it'll be over. I told you that, didn't I, Ruth? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that I knew it would be over. I didn't know what they were doing or how they were going to do this thing, but it was such an immense thing. There were people there, as a matter of fact, at Los Alamos that were concerned that possibly nitrogen would have a chain reaction and blow up the world.
Oppenheimer was concerned about that.
Well, yeah, but I don't know. Nobody really was. They weren't so seriously concerned that they didn't do it. They did it. I mean, they did the test. But let me think if there's anything else.
Let me just hold you there. I want to go and get the document here that you have. So, Alan, you received a document at the end of your service regarding safeguarding information. Okay?
I think I got that document. I think that document was given to me after the war had ended in September, but before I was out of the service.
Well, it's dated the 12th of February, 1946.
Oh, then I was out of the service.
Right. My father had to sign a document that was dated August 13th, which was just after
that was right after the
Trinity test. And I'm just going to hand
No,
this
August
to you.
13th was after we had dropped one of the bombs already on Hiroshima.
Right. Now his document is not the same as yours.
No.
But its wording implies
the same thing.
the same thing. Would, in your opinion, do you think just any normal Army Air Force guy would have signed a document like this?
No.
He would have had to be doing something
Yes.
that where they were requiring him not to say anything.
Nobody that I know of that was in the infantry or the artillery or the Air Force had anything to do with this,
Right.
other than the guys that were in the project.
So the possibility that this is a document that not the same as yours, but similar in intent of yours, came out of the same project is there.
Oh, I think so. I mean, I'm not sure of that, but I know that maybe people that were in the CIA or at that time the CIC had to sign such a document.
Right.
Counterintelligence Corps.
Okay. So this indicates something special about his service in terms of
Oh,
security.
absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Very good.
It
And
says it right there.
It says it right on the document. Okay. So I have to thank you for giving me the time
That's a pleasure.
and the incredible memory of names and places.
Isn't
and
he fantastic?
it's unbelievable.
Oh, it isn't
The
at all.
dates and
Alan, it's not at all.
Really? I can't
make it
remember
up as
70
I go
years ago.
along. That's
well, you
all.
made it up, but you actually duplicated word for word what you told me on the phone the other day.
Well, I have a good memory.
Yeah, you did it.
You know, to be a good liar, you have to have a fabulous